Welcome back to Love, Life, and Legacy, the podcast dedicated to helping you navigate these hyper-sexualized times of ours. I said that all with a clenched jaw, just to see if I could. So today, everybody, I'm going to be talking about, I have a presentation. If you want to see it, it's going to be on YouTube. Some slides, some basic slides, but if you're a visual person, feel free to watch. But it's all about unpacking a very eagle eye perspective of history about romance, sex, marriage, so that you can understand the context of where we're at. Because we're in a very strange time when people often, for the most part, experience sex in isolation, which is the antithesis of the very purpose. Sex was never meant for the individual to serve themselves. That doesn't make any sense. That's not how you perpetuate life or produce love or lineage or anything like that. That's through interaction with other people. So inherently, by design, sex is about others and serving and loving and commitment, these beautiful things that make us feel nice and warm and fuzzy inside. And yet in our world, it's for the most part experienced in isolation with technology, with a computer or a phone or something. And it hasn't always been that way. And it doesn't need to always be that way. We can change the future if we can understand the past. So today, I'm just unpacking a little bit about where we came from. And it's all for the sake of helping you to make more informed decisions about your future so you can get the most out of life and experience God-centered sexuality. That's what it's all about. Enjoy this episode. All right, welcome back. I was just checking some tech. I got busted. For everybody who's listening to this, if you'd like some visuals, I got some slides for you. It'll be on YouTube over here in that part of the world, aka the internets. But today I'm going to kind of give a presentation on, not a presentation. Let's step back for a second. I think one of the key things that Ainun can provide in this podcast can provide is context, because a lot of you don't understand the context of where we're at in history, where we came from in terms of traditions, and all you see is the result, and you think that this is life, this is how things always were, because it's hard to imagine that civilization was so different not so long ago. And in the area of sexuality and love, romance, we are in a weird place, and we weren't always here. And there's a bit of a story to be told that if you were to understand the longer trajectory of humanity, and you were to understand a little bit where we came from, you could understand so clearly where we're at now and how we got here. And based on that, you can make much better decisions, okay? Because a lot of people are just reacting. It's like they think, yeah, we've always had phones, obviously. Like if anybody was born after the year 2000, it's hard to imagine another world. When in reality, you don't even know. You don't even know. This is where I can get old. This is where I just pretend I'm sitting on a rocking chair and I got a really nice beard. That'll never happen. But imagine a time, kids, imagine a time when there was no smartphones, no ticking, talking, no Instagramming. And if you wanted to go on the computer in the 1990s, you had a telephone in your house. Maybe if you were in the middle class, you had 3 telephones in your house. They were connected to a wall. There were no pictures on this phone, just buttons. And all it did was call other people. And if you wanted to go on the internet, which for some reason required you to put a CD into a computer, never understood, I have no idea what was happening there. You'd have to unplug your phone so that nobody could call you, and then use that same line to make the worst noise in human history, which sounded a little something like beep, bop, bop, beep. And it would connect you to this wide web of the internet where you could send pictures, and it would take about 15 minutes to send a picture to a friend. And then it would take about 20 minutes for that picture to download onto your computer, right? Imagine that. So this is not long ago. That was in the 1990s. Maybe for some of you, it seems so long ago, but historically speaking. But what about generations ago? What you'll find is that the way that people discovered companionship and married, and the reason why they got married in the first place, was drastically different than our modern era. Everything in our present world is about our feelings, okay? And that means who you end up with romantically. But if you actually look at it, it's what drives us sexually. When we start to unpack why people watch porn, there's always an emotional reason. It's due to some lack of real relationships, lack of self-respect, lack of something. And so it's a compensation. It's an attempt to fix a heart with a Band-Aid, which will never work, right? And so if we can understand that our modern world is in large part a slave to their feelings, then you can start to understand, oh, there must be a way out. If we can understand our feelings and how they work, then we can get through this, right? But I want to take you back a little bit, because if you see these slides here, again, this will be on YouTube if you want to see the presentation, but marriage used to be just about surviving. Like, my wife was born in the countryside of Mongolia. And when you live with your family, like, she grew up many times frostbitten. You know, why? Freezing cold, still have to eat, still have to kill a sheep, still need to go outside. How do you poo and pee? How do you get water? It's all outside. All you have is a tent, snowstorm, cold, right? In that environment, imagine, like, Mom, I don't feel like it, right? That kind of attitude in a tent. There's no time for that. I think I like this guy. There's none of that. It's like, we as a family are just trying to survive, okay? And we're talking about hundreds of years ago. Let's talk about thousands of years ago up until just a couple hundred years ago. It was really largely about the survival of your lineage and the survival of individuals through marriage. So the reason for two people coming together was, alliances, families just trying to make it, just trying to get by, just trying to continue their lineage, right? Not great, not so inspiring, especially through our present rubric, our lens of like why we would get married. So that's like up until very recently, and still exists in a bunch of countries, right? I just heard a great testimony from a brother who's in Bangladesh, and his parents, they're still doing arranged marriages in Bangladesh and still doing it in India. Interestingly enough, if you go to India or you just go online and research India, their divorce rates are sub 10%. I've heard as low as 2%, 5%. That doesn't mean that they're all happy and functional and healthy. There's some abuse in there. It doesn't mean that that's the panacea. That's not what I'm painting. But I'm saying that where there is purpose and meaning beyond emotions, you have sustainability. But in our modern world, the reason why a lot of people get married and a lot of people get into sexual relationships, and the reason why they justify watching porn, for instance, is because of feelings. Feelings come and go, like Colorado weather. It's like a different season every half day. I swear to you, so it's Tuesday as of this recording. On Sunday night here in Colorado, there's a snowstorm. I was supposed to go to a meeting, could not go. There's just so slipping and sliding everywhere. I erred on the side of caution for once, paid off. Today, t-shirts. People wearing t-shirts. This is not global warming. This is Colorado. There's a saying that always sunny, always beautiful, sometimes Colorado. And that's the same with our emotions. Like, imagine how much you could love somebody based on your pheromones, based on all these things. And then you say, like Romeo and Juliet, I love you forever. And then that lasted 24 hours. They were both dead. This is an extreme case, but you cannot hang your future on emotions, because emotions come and go with the wind, okay? So at least in the past, it was more strategic. It was about families. This is a key point, because in our faith, we also don't promote the idea of like, oh, two random kids like each other, they have feelings for each other, or they're horny for each other. Yeah, that's a great premise for a relationship. Let's try that. You know why? Because we've been trying that. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later with the hippies. But there's no vision there. It's purely reaction. This is against the High Noon Way. The High Noon Way is about intentionality, forming a vision, living with intentionality. You will find your way. And this, again, in the past, family was always a part of it. Before a man would just say, hey, I want to marry that girl, I like her, he'd have to go to the father. Because you know who's super tough? A young guy without parental supervision. He can take over the world. Put that same kid in front of the father of the girl that he likes, and he's whimpering in his little ski boots or whatever. I don't know. I'm in Colorado. He's scared little child next to a man who's like helped to raise this human and like invested so much of himself. So there was a tradition where family had a lot of say in the making of a marriage. And that very, very recently only started to go away. So a big catalyst for the change was actually coming out of France. So as much as France is known for, like, we love the idea that it's the land of romance and love, it actually created this false sense of, feelings trump. And again, this is not me crapping on France. Every country has good points and bad points. Let's just say that. I'm in America, not perfect. Okay. And I've traveled the world. No such thing as a perfect country. So with that said, there were people like Rousseau. There were like, there's paintings, there's music, there's this whole revolution, this romantic revolution where it was all about the individual and the feelings being the epicenter of your reality, and that being paramount for decision making. So follow your heart became a very important cry that people latched onto and said, yes, this feels right to follow my heart. Now think about this. How many movies have you seen where that was the main message of the movie? Just follow your heart and it won't lead you astray. That's probably the worst advice ever. Your feelings do matter. So do other people's feelings. So does, I don't know, your physical health. So does reality, our commonly shared reality, right? So yes, it's not to avoid our feelings, but it's definitely not to be a slave to them either. That makes you a child. Okay? So this was in the 1700s, right? So the 18th century is really when this idea of individual romanticism becoming a priority. Like, not only is this a good idea, this is the way. And the Western world followed suit because it is exciting to follow your feelings until it's not, until you crash and burn into a wall, okay? So this started to, this desire for individuals, and I do believe there's providential reasons too, right? That individuals were seeking sovereignty, that like, I don't want anybody to control my destiny. There is some good stuff in there, but it wasn't God at the center of this decision-making. It was feelings, which is me, which can mean many different things, okay? Feelings can be true, and they can be something that you're experiencing together with God. There's something like eternal in these feelings. Feelings can also mean, trauma, right? Resurfacing. It can mean your nervous system just is all fried and it's giving you mixed signals. So to trust your feelings, it could also mean, hey, I got drunk and now I have these feelings. So it could be a possession of being under the influence of drinking or drugs, or love is like a drug, right? So it's really important to understand that we didn't form marriages, and we definitely didn't just follow our sexual impulses culturally. It was always frowned upon until very recently. Okay, so it was like marriage is supposed to be exclusive because we know that historically this is what society needs. This is what keeps us together. And any society that strays from really strong families for more than 3 generations very quickly falls apart. And America is actually in this 3rd generation. And I'm going to get into that because I want to get into the next slide, but um, from the 18th century to the 19th century. So you start to get into, when media is starting, the printing press. You got all these, you got radios are out there, like ideas are circulating, and romance, the idea of romanticism, and now America's being formed and finding its way. And that's very much about the individual, but it's centered on God. But people are like experimenting with a new way of living. Okay. So up until then, it's really tribal. I remember this guy drove us through rural France, and he showed us, hey, see those walls over there? That was a village, and that was the barrier that kept them safe. And we said, from who? And he said, well, look over that direction. See that village over there? They also have the same walls. So these are warring villages. So people were like really tribal all around the world. But now that like globalization, people traveling more, intercultural stuff, these ideas are spreading, and the idea of romantic love is spreading, and a new paradigm for sex is taking place. And so it's challenging these old kind of dusty ideas that seem old fashioned, but are tried, tested, and true. And that leads me to the 1960s. Okay. I mean, there's a lot of gaps in this, but I don't want you to suffer too long. So I don't want this to be too long. But in the 1960s, this is where there's a massive shift, where you saw the hippies, okay, their parents were all in the Second World War, traumatized, seen probably the most horrific stuff you can imagine. It probably killed people, probably just stuff that you'd never want to see. But they were known as kind of the greatest generation because they prevented the world from being under the authority of a monster, right? But there was no therapy back then to deal with PTSD. There was no even word for PTSD back then. So they were traumatized. And they raised this generation of kids known as the baby boomers. And the baby boomers were raised, imagine, by a bunch of traumatized people who were trying their best.
Hey, do you love your spouse? Well, if you do, you will love the Radiant program. It is a program dedicated to couples, to blessed couples that want to take your marriage and your intimacy, spiritually, physically, emotionally, intimacy to heavenly heights. If you are struggling in your relationship to any degree, this is the program for you. We're going to help you break through in your intimate relationship with your spouse. So check it out at highnoon.org if you want to join the Radiant program with other blessed couples. I'll see you there.
But America was a very Christian nation. The West was very much centered still on Christ, but also dabbling with a desire to want to be romantic. So at this point, you have a lot of television, and it's telling a different story about love. It's showing, all sorts of different things through movies, right? And the hippies come in, and if you look at the hippie movement, it's very interesting because they started out by talking about God. A lot of even the early songs from hippies are all about God. And that was the premise, is like, we're going to experience God in a new way. How? Without our parents. And so they're like, we're not going to do our parents' God. That's stifling. We're going to figure it out for ourselves. By being calculated? No. By learning from history? Not even close. By reinventing all the mistakes of the past, but repackaging them as something new and progressive. And so that's what the hippies did. And they completely took parents out of the picture from God and their experience of God, but also sex. This is where the free love movement came to pass. That means there's, I believe his name was Timothy Leary, was the champion. I think somebody, he championed this phrase of, if it feels good, do it. And that became the motto of an entire generation. Like, you should follow your feelings, and to the nth degree. And if you track this generation and what they did to the topic of sex, is they turned sex into a primarily self-serving occupation that is divorced from repercussions, commitment, responsibility. So they wanted all the fun without any of the responsibility. What happened? Well, that became the most divorced generation in history, right? Is they started to divorce each other at rates that our world hadn't seen. Why? Because they didn't like the responsibility aspect. And love comes with a responsibility, whether you like it or not. Sex comes with a whole lot of responsibility, whether you like it or not. You can't avoid it. You can try. And they tried. Oh man, did they try. But they failed. And so this was the premise. This is before still TikTok, before all this stuff, but this is the land. And then from there, you went into the kind of late 70s. There's a lot of drugs, a lot of partying, sex just continued. 80s became hyper like self-centered and aggressive. And then you look at the 90s and we have these things called sitcoms back then. And the biggest sitcoms like Friends, Seinfeld, they were the hits. They took over the Western world like crazy. They're all about free sex. If you look at them, sex without responsibility. Children were adults acting like children. And that really painted the landscape for the casual sex movement to have validation. Now America is a place that promotes this stuff, right? And so that was in the 90s too, again, before things were so aggressive with porn. Porn was very difficult to come about back then. You had to go to video shop or know somebody who had access to a creepy sleaze bucket video shop. There's a lot of shame associated with the viewing of porn, right? And so, yeah, they're just, the hippies, they messed up. I know there's still a lot of people that glamorize the hippie movement. A lot of good music came out, like technically good, devoid of substance for the most part. A lot of questions, not a lot of answers. Really great sounds, though. I mean, I love a lot of classic rock, but it's really a soulless time in terms of music. And in terms of sex, this was a shift in the cosmos took place, okay? And so now we're in this era where we're 3 generations away from a time when there was, back in the day, I remember at the first High Noon Summit, we had a speaker that said, in the 1940s and 50s, up until that point in America, if you wanted to get a hotel room with a woman, you had, as a man, you had to produce your marriage certificate. That was the law in many states. Even California, which is a crazy liberal state, right? That's what it was like. And so that was, my grandparents. And now in this generation, there is X, like what used to be Twitter. They have an AI called Grok, in which case they've found, I was just doing some research, 34,000 images of produced by AI of like sexual, child-related sex stuff, like just completely mainstream, so much sexual stuff, songs on the radio that would have been considered X-rated a couple decades ago. Now just like, yeah, it's just another song about, what was that? I forget. I don't know if I should say. There's that song where it was the noise of sex was the name of the song. I forget what it's called. Anyway, but it's all super self-centered to the point where we can tailor make everything with AI. We can have individual sized portions of whatever we want, self-serving. And are we happier? The answer is, at an alarming rate, we are more isolated, depressed, suicidal in many cases, because we are more disassociated from meaning, purpose, context, responsibility in relation to sex than ever before. Kids never ask their parents anymore, is it okay if I date? They just do it. Their parents, oftentimes, I know a bunch of parents that don't have anything to say. Their kids are like, I'm dating. And they're like, okay. Because they don't have a vision, right? This is where High Noon comes in. If you formulate a very clear vision and you fight every day to maintain that vision through consistency, through effort, through accountability, the 5 virtues, your life will be in a completely different stratosphere than the average person who's just reacting, who's just, they're going by their feelings. There's no vision there. There's no idea of how far you are away from your ideals because you're not clear on your ideals and you're not clear about where you are, okay? So it's really important that we focus on character first, okay? Character, okay, this is in terms of marriage and finding a partner, but in terms of sexuality too. Like a lot of people they want to address their pornography issues or their unwanted sexual habits. You can, but you don't fix the external stuff and assume that everything's going to be okay. This is an internal, inside job. And once you really understand who you are, why you do the things that you do, then you can start to really curate a life centered around being the person that you want to be, right? So that's character stuff. 5 virtues is all about character. When you start working on like that, and then you find another person who's also put in that effort, marriage, you could be married to so many different types of people. Benji's been saying this for years. Like people are always worried, is this the right person? Look, you need to understand the pillars of what it means to be a strong character for you, by your definition. And it shouldn't just be something you make up. It should be something that you really study, characteristics of a strong, virtuous person. We would say somebody who's fulfilled the first blessing, somebody who's mature, right? What does maturity look like? Find another mature person, and they can come in many different shapes and sizes and races and cultures and all that. It doesn't matter. If they adhere to the same regimen of character traits, you can make it work for sure. My wife and I couldn't be any more different in terms of like our personality. Ridiculous. Like I was just talking to her today and I realized she wasn't listening at all. Because to me, listening is super important. To her, it's like, it's optional, right? So, okay, fine. But we have the same characteristics, and so we can get through anything. And we've been through a lot, right? Commitment, too. Again, okay, so if you follow romantic love, it's feelings, then physical, then figuring it out, then lamenting your life decisions, and then depression, and then repeat, okay? This is character first, your character. Then if you want to proceed to being in a relationship with somebody, to going to be married with somebody, that they are also somebody who of character. And then you make a commitment first. Before you enter any physical interaction, you make a commitment first. That's called a vision. Because again, a bunch of emotions and romantic stuff without a container just will destroy stuff. It'll destroy so many things. But the container is the commitment. Okay, so it starts with commitment. And then love over time, like no matter how much you think you feel love for somebody, you don't even know them. They don't even know themselves. This is the thing about young people getting married. You can say all day, oh, I know this person, but you don't. And they don't know themselves. I've said it many times on this podcast. I was talking to a guy who'd been married for 40 plus years, and he said, you do not know your spouse until you've been married for at least 20 years. And that made me so scared. And also I laughed, and I was also like, that can't be true. And now it's been about 15 years for me, and I can say for sure that there's nothing truer. And it's because I'm still learning who I am. My wife is still learning who she is, and we're learning who each other are. And it's so beautiful, but it's an investment of loving and serving the other person, even when you don't feel like it, even when they're being a jerk. Can you not be a jerk? Right? Even if you're being a jerk, can they receive you? This is how love is forged. So when you go this path, you're going against the grain, but that's how real love is forged. So feelings are real, but they're not enough. They're not enough. They're not the basis of anything true or great. It's information. It's like, how do I feel about this? Oh, that's important to know, right? But it's not the be all end all by any means, right? So for thousands of years, humanity always involved the family or community in their courting process, so that there were other people outside of the relationship that weren't drunk off of feelings. You make bad decisions when you're possessed by feelings. But if you have other people who can be a sober voice when you're drunk on love or the feelings of love, let's say, that is a great recipe. That's not how most people do it, but that's how we've been doing it out here in the high noon world, based on the unification faith, based on our true parents' vision for creating a sustainable world where we can't live in a world where people are suffering emotionally, because you'll always make bad decisions when you're suffering emotionally, because you don't have access to your full capacity when so much of your energy is being siphoned by pain and suffering. Good decisions are made by healthy people, and healthy people are thriving emotionally. So if you want that, and you want a marriage that lasts, you want love that lasts, you want sex that improves every year, that's internal. That's not external. Character first, then commitment, then starting to work on love. That's the path to creating sustainable love in your life and in this world. We have a roadmap. We're still new at this, right? As a movement, we can't say that we've got it mastered at all, but we can definitely admit that we're doing pretty well, and our vision is pretty clear. It's getting clearer, and the more that people etch out this path, the more it's going to be easier for the next ones and the next ones, until it just becomes so obvious that this is the right path. There are enough people doing really well in their marriage and their blessings. My God, there are a lot of people struggling too. Again, the more that we break through as individuals, as couples, as families, the easier it is cosmically, but also practically, to then let others get through the difficulties, thrive, and then we create a counterculture. So this is longer than I thought it was going to be, and also I didn't say like a quarter of the things that I wanted to, but this was a very glib overview of the past couple millennia. But the main gist is that the societies that thrive are the ones with strong families, and the way that they create strong families is that those couples aren't in isolation. They don't form in isolation just by feelings, and they don't create families in isolation because they're connected. We have a worldwide movement. Stay connected to your people. High Noon just tries to be the bridge makers that connects you to the people that are already there, right? We're not producing humans, we're connecting humans. So please invest in character, commitment, work on being a loving person. Things will work out. As always, everybody, if you need anything, let me know.
Hey guys, there are a lot of nonprofits and fundraisers out there, but High Noon is something special, don't you think? If you want to contribute to something, if you've wanted to give back in some way, then look no further, because High Noon is your place. We're still a nonprofit, guys, and our programs and our events and workshops really run off of you. So please consider becoming a donor. Actually, no. Become a donor, please, my friend, especially if you've benefited from this podcast, which is totally free, and our programs that are totally free. Then go to highnoon.org/donate, and you can become a donor for just $10 a month, or $20 a month, or $1,000 a month, whatever your wallet can do, and whatever you want to give back and contribute. All right, become a donor, join the club, and see you.